And that's the final video number 4 on biodiversity and ecosystem on how to protect them. And so we'll end up this video by looking at the last aspect of conservation, which is the ecosystem approach, how to protect through ecosystem approach. At this point, when we think about ecosystem, we're thinking about a region, a specific area that we want to protect because, well, such as, for example, the natural reserve we do have here close to UC Merced, we have the UC Merced Vernal Pool Reserve, which is in fact an ecosystem approach. They have put a fence around all of these small, small, over these wetlands to make sure that no construction will happen, everything will be protected the way it is, because a lot of the organisms living in close to those vernal pools and foothills are in fact very small. And so by trying to protect just a fairy shrimp, it will be difficult just to work on the population of fairy shrimp. So it's easier to, and more also logic to work on protecting the ecosystem that will in fact protect directly the species. So we're working on some plans called habitat conservation plans, trying to see how we will be managing the land, which surface will be protected, how we'll be dealing with the resources available on site, what are living resources. And then we're creating potentially a protected place, which can be, depending on the status, the funding, it can be a reserve, it can be a refuge, it can be a park, or if it's owned by someone, it will be then a private land. So to follow the ecosystem approach, there is kind of the 4R rule that is usually followed. We look at the representation of the ecosystem. How many looking at the aspect of biodiversity of that ecosystem, what is the value of the biodiversity within the ecosystem? In fact, we're looking at the value side of that ecosystem. Then we look at its potential resiliency. How good is that ecosystem to be able to resist to disturbance? And also, what would be the cost of such? Then we're looking at the potential redundancy, making sure that within the ecosystem you're trying to save, it's not already too late, and that you have at least enough species to make sure that if you start fencing it and protecting it, well, your ecosystem and your species will be surviving it. And then finally, of course, the last one is more like reality. How much money will it cost? Will you have the support of the politicians, for example, for that? What is the scientific approach of that in terms of monitoring, managing all of that? Really looking about money at this end and how much it will cost. So when we come with the ecosystem approach, there are a couple of strategies that can be applied. Usually, we can check with the land trust, which are non-profit organizations specialized in developing protection plan of conservation. They will usually, they are not directly paid by the people making the conservation, trying to conserve the location, but they will help the people they will assist, they will provide stewardship, and so managing, helping, guiding those people to conserve the land. And so by producing what we call conservation easements, making sure that everything is made in a way that the land will be conserved, will be protected the correct way. Then those conservation easements is in fact agreement that are made between whoever was owning the place that we want to protect. That can be in fact a private, and after the land trust, who will be in charge of making sure that the place is protecting and will be in charge of regulation. As soon as those agreements, those easements are signed, the protection will be acted and will be in place forever. There is very little, I don't think, in fact, I don't know about the policies, but I think it is difficult to break such contract. And then once those easements are done, this is protected, so you cannot build or you cannot extract anything from those land because it's part of the conservation plan. So you're very limited into it. And if you want to build something, you have to go through different steps of review to make sure that the building that you ask is in fact relevant to and in adequation with the protection. In some cases, you have to go through mitigation. That means that with mitigation, well, you have to, there is no other way than using the region that was supposed to be protected for maybe lack of space, lack of resources, for whatever possibility, I mean, for whatever reason, you have to in some way modify the ecosystem and you cannot protect it. So what will happen is several things. You will try, I mean, you'll try to avoid as many impact as possible, potentially kind of reviewing the plan to make your installation less than it was supposed, minimizing the impact of whatever you were planning to build in general, potentially build, but then after make a restoration, making sure that you are helping in some way the surrounding of your environment going back to its normal shape. You might be able to try to build in a way that it's more sustainable than what you had planned initially. And then another way is also to give money to protect another place, such as, for example, we would have to build on the vernal pools where we will give money to a vernal pool that we can find in Sacramento to make sure that those places would be safe. So it's more like an exchange of, okay, of right and money. Okay, take the right of building there, but I will make sure that I'm giving money to protect this other place. So conservation has been working quite a lot in the US. We had went through different protection laws, especially since the 70s, and the environmentalism movement that we described in week 1 during our first lectures. There has been a protection of, if you remember, protection of, or more like regulation of air quality, water quality, but protection of endangered species. The Species Act has been signed around the 70s and has been pretty successful. Let's see this little movie that describes the success story of those conservation in the US and the fact that there is still work to do.
There was a time in America when we took what we wanted without thinking about consequences. But as industry polluted our air and rivers, as development destroyed our wildlife, we realized that for humanity to truly thrive, we must work with nature instead of against it. An idea that started a movement. And the foundation behind one of the greatest conservation success stories you've probably never heard of: the Magnuson-Stevens Act. In the 70s, U.S. fisheries were in crisis, and by the mid-90s, it was clear that even more needed to be done. Species were overfished, fishermen competed unsafely for dwindling resources, and fishing communities suffered.
You know, it really was a crisis, a federal disaster, and it looked like they were going to take decades and decades to rebuild.
Really, it was a pretty dark time in the fishery. I put the net down and looked around some old spots, and it's like, man, there's nothing here. Way too many boats chasing way too few fish.
We fished when the government told us to fish. Regardless of the weather, regardless of the condition of your vessel, caused us to glut markets with fish and low prices.
And it wasn't just the species we were fishing that were harmed. Dolphins, sea turtles, and other marine life were unintentionally caught as well. So in a time of crisis, we took a hard look at the state of U.S. fisheries, and instead of taking more, we took action. In 1976, Congress passed the Magnuson-Stevens Act and laid the groundwork for a mutually beneficial relationship. In 1996 and 2006, the Act was strengthened to include stricter harvest limits. This led to an unprecedented mobilization by the federal government, fishery management councils, and fishermen to make real progress. With science-based catch limits introduced across the U.S., and with EDF's help working with fishermen to build in conservation incentives, fisheries began to recover.
You do the right thing and the ocean cooperates. It's amazing how quickly it rebounded.
Meaning fishers could go out year-round when conditions were optimal and safe.
I could go fishing when I wanted to rather than when I had to. That gave us a stable market, which increased the value of our fish. I had no idea that this would be so good for the fishery and for my business.
What used to be take everything we can became take only what we need.
As long as They are sticking to science-based limits. It works. Sustainably managed fisheries really are essential to the balance in the oceans, which is essential for life on the planet.
What was once a crisis became a partnership between humans and nature. A success for today and model for going forward. But despite our progress, more work needs to be done. Fishermen still face economic challenges, and we can make even greater conservation gains. Don't take more. Take action and support our fishermen by eating sustainable American seafood. Learn how at seafood.edf.org.
Okay, so that was one example of a success story. We do have a couple of success stories in the US, and one of the proudness of the US is in fact its national parks system. About 58 national parks being created in the US since more than a century has been a vitrine, kind of an example led by the US on protecting, conserving some specific region of its nature. And we do have so many examples close to us, of course, Yosemite National Parks, Mojave National Parks, Pinnacle National Parks, etc. It's just very successful. However, the prime of tourism become a bit an overload nowadays, and there is some regulation happening that has changed a little bit how we can visit those places. And some species also have been saved thanks of conservation strategies, such as the grizzly bears in Yellowstone, or the bald eagle, or the cranes. Those species were declining in population, and through the correct approach of conservation, their population has been saved from a potential extinction. So this is for conservation. Very briefly, to end up this video, we'll talk about restoration, which is a repairing part of a degrading environment. So with a restoration, it's mostly the second approach when already the bad thing has happened. And so we have an environment that has been degrading, damaged, or destroyed, and we're trying to help on the recovery of that environment. You have this example with this picture in the mid-80s of a place where cattle were trying to graze and feed, and you could see that there was not so much for them to eat, and mostly everything was kind of a desert. So we'll see the next picture will show you how that has improved. But quickly, I mean, the prime of maybe recovery, it's costly in terms of money, and it's also long. It's a long-term commitment because you have, over time, you have to give time to nature to come back to the way it was and make sure that you have some monitoring and adjustment be done. But it's successful, it's working. And that's, in fact, about 10 years after of restoration, the same place, it's hard to imagine, but that's exactly the same place that has recovered after they moved out the cattle and they had some monitoring and some change happening in the river, but they've been able to have nature coming back to the way it was. The point is, what is the way it was? How, up to where do you restore? Do you restore when to the place, I mean, to an ecosystem that was there maybe 50 years ago, 500 years ago, or so? So it's difficult sometimes to estimate up to where you want to go. And then also all the logistic behind in terms of monitoring, making sure that it's working, tend to take times and of course takes money. But we're able to do that. We have some site that has been damaged or degraded pretty badly, and we've been able to rehabilitate them, giving them a new purpose, such as, for example, this landfill that has been covered and kind of treated in a way that it has become a golf court or a park in itself. We do have some places that were degraded because of some human activities, and so we created an artificial ecosystem that was not there before, such as a vernal pool that has been created in that place that was degraded by some toxic pollutants. Or we also work on what we call bioremediation, which is something we'll talk more when we go over pollution. The idea that a place that has been polluted, such as that one, with some pollutants, we kind of monitor, we're providing potentially, I mean, we either let nature doing it naturally, or we're providing some bacteria, some microorganism to the site, monitoring it, maybe providing some nutrients for that, for this site to be losing its pollution. In fact, those microorganisms will eat the pollution and get rid of it. So that's something, again, we will talk more when we go over the chapter of pollution. The last thing in terms of protecting, respecting life, biodiversity, the ecosystem, is to be able to adapt our society to our environment. And so it's what we call a reconciliation ecology, where we're trying to have our activities, our society, our life in more agreement that goes along with nature, with the ecosystem, such as, for example, having a urban planning that is more in agreement with the natural ecosystem, developing, pushing for organic farming, using more native plants in itself, landscaping management, all of that. In cities, that means to have some yards, some parks, more having our cities more green, allowing for birds to nest in some of the infrastructure of our cities, allowing places for bats also to establish their habitats, and as I mentioned, having places in the city where you have more green. That include, for example, you might see that in San Francisco and other big cities, roofs that are getting greener. We start having small crops on the top of the roof, or more plants, or more type of grass. And that helps, in fact, making the place greener and kind of introducing the nature inside of the cities. With that, we are done with this video. I'll invite you to watch the slides to help you reviewing this chapter, and also the chapter map that will be available also for your review. And I'll see you then after for our next set of video on which we will talk about food production and food consumption. See you soon.